Welcome to Real Life Beyond Faith, where a formerly Christian, currently atheist couple takes a deep dive into the experience of life after deconversion. This is episode 9. I'm your host, Jenica Crail.
And I'm your host, Patrick Crail.
Thank you for tuning in this week. We have a few things that we're going to talk about this week. We had to kind of switch it up at the last minute due to audio issues. We tried again to set stuff up so we could record an interview tonight and just can't get the audio to cooperate with us. It keeps dropping on one end when the other end starts to talk, and it's just driving us insane. We've messed with the settings. We can't get it to work. So we will eventually have an interview, I promise, if we can just figure this crap out. What the heck?
Like I've said before in previous episodes, bear with us.
Bear with us, yeah. Yeah, it's getting frustrating, but we do have some things that we want to talk about this week, so at least we've got that. So first of all, some of the stuff going on in the news that's pretty big right now is this take a knee situation. I would imagine that most of you are probably familiar, at least somewhat, with what's going on in the NFL with certain players who aren't standing for the national anthem in protest, peaceful protest, about just the state of our country and the situation with racial injustice. And so some players are, using their, not really their voice, but using their body to show protest that they don't agree with how things are going down, and they're not going to stand for the national anthem until they feel that our nation is actually paying attention to these things.
Yeah, so there were several teams this week in the NFL that they either did not participate on the field for the national anthem, or they all linked arms in solidarity, even with, some of the owners involved with the teammates. And then some of the teammates actually taking a knee, but they were all there. They were all together.
The thing that makes me crazy about all of this is that is a perfectly acceptable way to protest. It's peaceful. It's effective because it's getting noticed.
It's not causing any harm.
No, it's not causing any harm, but it's making a very important stand. And yet, our president, the president of the United States, has been tweeting nonstop about how it's disrespectful to our country and to our flag, and going on. And he's talking about people who support him in his stance on respecting the flag. I get notifications when Donald Trump tweets, unfortunately, but I set it up that way on purpose because I want to know what our president is saying. And it's just disturbing. He's been tweeting nonstop about this.
Yeah, so he called for the owners to fire the players who are, protesting and taking a knee. So he's calling for people to be fired from playing football because they're still there. All they're doing is taking a knee during the anthem. But on the other hand, remember Charlottesville? Nazis marching through the streets with tiki torches, and he took, 2 days to even, say anything.
Calling them out or...
Yeah. So we're supposed to have outrage over people kneeling during a song.
Yeah.
But not outrage during blatant racism and violence.
Well, it just goes to show you what a horrible human being he is and what a terrible hypocrite. I mean, he wears it on his sleeve. There's no denying it. Yeah, people are still denying it, so apparently there is denying it, but it's absolutely insane.
And I saw one meme today. It was a picture of Colin Kaepernick next to a picture of, the Nazis with the tiki torches, and it had a caption under Colin Kaepernick saying that he's, in quotes, a son of a bitch, because that's what Donald Trump called them. Mm-hmm. But then in quotes under the Nazis, it said very fine people, which again is, what Donald Trump called them.
Yeah. He's even denying the whole reason why they're protesting. Like this tweet says, the issue of kneeling has nothing to do with race. It is about our respect for our country, flag, and national anthem. NFL must respect this.
Is he gaslighting us?
Apparently. He says, so proud of NASCAR and its supporters and fans. They won't put up with disrespecting our country or our flag. They said it loud and clear.
And the thing is,
go NASCAR.
Yeah. The thing is, it's not disrespecting the country. What's disrespecting the country is the injustice.
Yeah. The fact that there is institutionalized racism in our country is what is disrespectful.
That's unpatriotic.
And unpatriotic.
But, people are complaining that these war veterans didn't die for, people to disrespect the country and the flag, but they fought for our freedom to be able to express ourselves how we like and how we feel is important. And go ahead. Forced patriotism is not true patriotism. Like, if we are being forced to stand during the national anthem, how is that any better than how they're being treated in North Korea?
And that's not freedom. And it's a violation of the First Amendment.
So, yeah, that's what's going on in our country this week.
It's so weird to me, this obsession that they have with the flag. Like, you have to respect the flag. You can't do certain things with the flag. You can't put it on the ground. You can't burn it. You can't, all these rules surrounding this piece of cloth. And yet we don't put that much value on the human lives that these protests are about.
Most of those rules, which are ignored, there's baseball hats, there's boxers, all these things.
You're not supposed to wear the flag, yet people do.
Yeah, but no one cares about that. It's only when someone doesn't stand for the national anthem for a reason that people think is invalid. I mean, that's what it comes down to. They just don't think it's a valid reason to protest. And so they're going to make up excuses, like bring veterans into it and stuff, and like play a guilt trip. It's not about the veterans. Yeah. Well, plus people are watching football to be entertained, not to be political. That's what some of the arguments are.
Right. Which, I mean, in this climate in our country, people should be able to express their
disgust, distaste.
Yeah, their disgust with the situation that we're in every outlet. And if you're going to sing the national anthem, which is a political song, at a football game, then people should be able, based on our First Amendment rights, to not participate. Those guys, they have the right to not participate in that song, and that doesn't make them terrible people. In fact, I think they're better people for standing up for humans rather than a stupid song or a stupid flag. Those things hold no meaning without the people that they represent. We need to stand up for those people.
Right.
All right. Getting my red up. Speaking of racial injustice and getting my red up, this past Saturday, I actually attended a rally for racial justice in Cincinnati, Ohio, with one of my friends, Bree, actually our friend, Bree. And it was really good. I've never been to a rally like that before. It was a pretty cool experience. It was, I think, a couple hours long. They had multiple speakers, but the keynote speaker was Dr. Cornel West. And I had never really heard much about him or from him. I listened to a little bit of one of his speeches as I was getting ready to go that day, just to kind of get a flavor for what he was like. So I don't know a lot about the guy. He seems pretty cool. He seems to be a highly educated person, but I've also heard a few things about him that I'll have to look into that I'm not quite sure about. So whatever I say here, take with a grain of salt, But they talked about the injustices that we're facing in our country and kind of how we can combat those. The one thing that I have a little bit of a problem with the rally is that I didn't hear a lot of practical advice being given on how to make these changes. I mean, the main thing that they pushed was voting, and that was huge. I mean, obviously, we all need to get out there and vote in the midterms, in local elections, everything. We need to be out there voting.
And weren't there a handful of representatives actually attending too? Yes,
there were council members. There were a ton of people running for office who are Black, and it was really cool because they called out their names and people would stand and everyone would clap and cheer for them. There were multiple standing ovations. It was really cool. My hands were actually starting to hurt because we were clapping so much. But the only practical advice they gave was about voting, at least that I picked up on. A lot of it I couldn't hear because the acoustics weren't great. But I don't know, like there was a lot of talk about spirituality and about how you have to kind of use your soul, and like about how the younger generation is losing their sense of morality and things like that. And I was just thinking, like, I wonder what they mean by that, because they weren't really elaborating on that. They were just saying, you know, the younger generation is losing their focus, losing their morality. And
And how does that tie into racial injustice?
Right. Like, is it victim blaming? Like, it kind of felt like maybe it was victim blaming. Like they're not fighting hard enough or something. I don't know. It was kind of weird. I didn't know like where exactly they were going with that. And I was thinking, okay, what do you mean by morality? Because if you're basing that on Christian standards of morality, are you talking about they're being sexually immoral, and so the injustices happening to them are because of their sexual immorality? Or, you know, I don't know. It was interesting. I would have liked to pick someone's brain, but obviously that wasn't going to be able to happen that day. There were way too many people there and it was kind of chaotic. But yeah, Dr. West, he talked a lot about God and about spirituality, but he used to be a pastor. I kind of expected that. And his speaking technique was kind of like a sermon. Like I felt like I was listening to a sermon.
Like Jerry DeWitt?
Yeah, kind of like that. If you guys aren't familiar, Jerry DeWitt is a he used to be
an ex-Baptist
Pentecostal preacher. So very like getting you revved up and excited and yelling his sermon and stuff. So it was kind of like that. Like he was walking back and forth on the stage and yelling. It was really entertaining. It was really like kind of cool. But I don't know. I would have liked to hear more practical ways to make a difference, I guess, and a lot less about spirituality, because that's pretty much useless in this fight, you know? And I didn't like the victim blaming aspect.
Right.
Like it's not the Black younger generation's fault that there's injustice against them. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Interesting.
Overall, it was a good experience, and there were some really great things said, and lots and lots of energy in the room, which was really cool to see. Then afterwards, I updated my voter registration.
Was there a good mix of people there as far as racially?
It was mostly Black people, but yeah, I did see a lot of white people there. That's lot good. Being like maybe, I don't know, a little less than a quarter of the people there. So, I mean, I guess that wouldn't be considered a lot, but more than I expected. So,
yeah.
I'd definitely like to go to more things like that and get more involved in those kinds of events and activities, because I'd really like to see a change in our culture and in our communities, in our country, and I'd love to be a part of it.
Yeah, and stuff like that helps to have more people involved
Right. And especially
and more diverse.
Yeah, more diversity. If more white people can get on board with this stuff, then we can all work together. That's one thing that they did talk about, is how we all need to work together. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, all of us need to come together to work towards justice. And they even mentioned that they saw a lot of diversity in the room and that it was refreshing. So
Cool.
pretty cool. Yep. I'm excited to get more involved. So tonight I went to a parade with the boys, and of course at every parade you go to, it seems like there are people who hand out like cards or information about their church, or sometimes like those little brochures or pamphlets, chick tracts, like explaining like how you can get saved and stuff. Well, I got one of those tonight, and I thought it might be fun to just like kind of read through it and discuss it as we were going. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So maybe you can like just start reading it, and then when we have something to say, we'll just stop.
All right. So on the front, there's a picture of a hospital hallway, and then some vials with a little dropper full of blood, looks like, or something red. But the title of it says, "It's all in the blood." So yeah, that must be blood. Looks kind of light to be blood, though. Looks like Kool-Aid.
It's all in the Kool-Aid. That's actually correct.
So inside it says, "Without shedding of blood is no remission." Wait, what? Without shedding of blood is no remission.
It's a verse.
It seems incomplete.
The Bible is terrible at grammar. Have you ever noticed that? Like it used to drive me insane when I would read verses and I'd be like, that was completely.
But is that is that missed in translation, or?
I don't know.
I mean, there's so many translations. Anyways, so without shedding of blood is no remission. Hebrews 9:22. Sickness had suddenly stopped a man's active business life and kept him from his place in the church where he had a respected role. He had never before considered his own need in the sight of God or where he would go when he died. A friend came to him and mentioned the sick merchant. "I have more than once been near death, and I can't describe what peace I enjoyed at the very thought of meeting God. Simply trusting in the precious blood of Jesus Christ is my only right to be there."
So is this someone talking to the guy?
A friend came to see him and mentioned the sick merchant.
Who's the sick merchant?
Are
they just talking random shit?
It might be talking about the Hebrews 9:22 verse.
Oh, maybe we're supposed to refer to that first. Anyway, continue.
Perhaps.
If we need to refer to it, we'll look it up.
Yeah. The sick man raised himself on his elbow and said, "I've been thinking about the same subject a lot lately. I haven't been sufficiently zealous in religion to say I can look into the future as you do. I will give everything I have if I could."
What?
Yeah, I took a quick read through this before we started, and
Does it not make sense?
I was confused. Yeah.
Okay.
The next section is "Religion doesn't save." "Religion gives no right to heaven," replied his visitor. "Religion never gave anybody peace with God. Only the blood of Jesus Christ can do that." The sick man seemed bewildered. He had thought that religion was the very best thing in the world, and that when he spoke of conversion or salvation, they simply expressed it in that way, and according to their own peculiar creed, the same thing as he called religion. His friend saw his confusion and said, "May I read you a short passage from the Bible?" With permission, he read an account from the first Passover.
Then they have a passage from Exodus 12:3-23. It says, "They shall take to them every man a lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and the upper door post of the houses, wherein they shall eat it. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the house where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when he seeth the blood upon the lintel and on the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come in unto your houses to smite you. What does this have to do with what they're talking about?
It's all in the blood.
Oh, so this verse is just about blood. And so it somehow, they were talking about how religion doesn't save you. And then there's this long ass verse about blood. I'm so confused.
I think it's trying to say that religion doesn't save you. Blood does.
Okay.
Blood sacrifice.
Okay. I see. Yeah. Like, I remember them having this rhetoric when we were in church, like how it's not about religion, it's about relationship. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And I was like totally on board with that. I'm like, yeah, like screw ritual and traditions, like that's not what saves you. Religion doesn't save you. The blood of Jesus saves you. But it's just, I mean, it's just a metaphor for religion. Like it's still religion. Like we're still believing in the divine, in God, in a doctrine. It's still religion. Like you can't just not use that word anymore because you think it has some kind of a negative connotation to it. Like it's still, I don't know. Anyway, this thing is kind of confusing. All right. So then it says Christ's blood cleanses. It was the blood shed and sprinkled, the blood trusted, and only it, he said, that gave safety to all within the houses that night. All under the shelter of the blood were safe, all outside it were doomed. There was a solemn silence in the room as he finished reading. That would not happen. Not a solemn silence, maybe like an awkward silence. Anyway. And then the sick man said slowly with great emotion, "It's all in the blood. I see it now. I have been trusting to my religion and my own righteousness, but now I see clearly that my only right to salvation is in the blood of Christ." The merchant lived to testify to others of the precious blood of Christ, the sinner's only right to enter heaven. How many think that religion is a savior? How many are trusting in their own righteousness and good works to take them to help? What? The wording of this thing is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And good works to take them or to help them into heaven. Whereas God declares that the precious blood of Christ, trusted in by the sinner, is his only shelter from the coming wrath. And then there's a verse from 1 John 1:7. The blood of Jesus Christ, his son, God's only begotten son, cleanses us from all sin. Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. Come to our church where we talk about blood
And murder.
Yeah. Blood and the murder of children.
That seems like a very
Super weird. I mean, go ahead, say.
weird and simple little story to try to get people to convert.
Right. It's kind of like a weird choice.
Yeah, like I don't know. It doesn't seem like it would be super effective.
Yeah.
Like in the story, the guy to the merchant saying, "Oh, it makes sense now."
Yeah. Like, oh, it's in the blood. Now it all clicks. What? Yeah, that's super weird. I haven't seen one like this before. Usually it's all about like fear. Like, are you sure of where you're going to go after you die? And then in big letters with like dripping blood, like heaven or hell. And then they go on to talk about how the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Christ Jesus our Lord. Yeah, I still know a lot of Bible verses. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, lest anyone should boast.
See, I hadn't even seen many of these things growing up, and like I was telling you earlier, I hadn't even heard of what a chick tract was until like a couple years ago.
Yeah, from Seth Andrews, right? Listening to
and
that
when that guy died.
What, the chick tract guy?
Yeah. I was like, what? What are these things?
Okay, big deal. What's this about? Well, he was the one who kind of got this whole thing started.
Right.
Like making these little pamphlets that you just like hand out to people. It makes
try to scare people into
makes witnessing easier. It's like a cop out kind of.
Yeah.
Instead of actually having real conversations with people, you just hand them this little tract
or put them under the windshield.
And you can get jewels in your crown in heaven. Yeah. I mean, they're completely ineffective. I've never heard of anybody actually, becoming a Christian because of these things.
That would be interesting to find out.
And look into.
Yeah. Like if anyone has.
I just can't see that being the case. Like, who reads one of these and is just like, oh, now I know the gospel and I just believe it. Yeah. Like it
on a little
doesn't make sense from an objective perspective. That's why so many of us look at it objectively and end up atheists. I sometimes will joke when I get one of these at work or something. Like, guys, I just learned the gospel. I'm saved now. Like my pastor one night was like, I get the feeling that you're not a Christian. Like, oh, really? You get that feeling, huh? It's kind of funny. I don't really take
Who said that?
I don't take it as a insult. One of my managers said that.
You said pastor.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Freudian slip. Yeah, one of the managers said that. But I thought this was kind of a funny little thing. There wasn't as much to talk about as I thought there would be. I thought we would be able to like stop in the middle of the story and like, dig into it. But it was kind of. I think
it was just too confusing and disjointed.
It was like confusing and kind of shallow. Like it didn't really get into any meat. It was just like, it's in the blood. You got to believe in the blood. Weird. That whole like blood sacrifice aspect of Christianity is kind of screwed up to begin with. Mm-hmm. And then to like latch on to that aspect of it to try to get people saved seems like a bad choice. Like you might not want to grasp on to this like ancient gross ritual part of your religion to convince people that you make sense,
Yeah.
Anyway. Before we move into the meat of our episode, which is going to be about coming out atheist, we're going to hear from a few of our friends' podcasts.
Have y'all ever wondered what it's like to be a redneck with empathy? Have you never heard of a Southerner who isn't a blathering bigot? Well, have I got the show for you. It's the Podunk Polymath Podcast, hosted by myself, Chris, and it's the sentiments of a secular, sarcastic, screwed-up Southern SJW and skeptic. You can find me and the show on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or your favorite podcatcher. Y'all stop on by and take it easy now, okay?
Hey, all you listeners, I'm Robert.
And I'm Amy from Secular Yakking.
And we just wanted to let you know that if you've got 30 minutes to kill,
then we're the podcast for you. We're just some old married couple who's been yakking at each other over the many years.
And we thought we should start making it so you can listen in on our yakking.
We dig past the mainstream and bring you the news that you may or may not have heard about.
We take a look at politics, religion, science, and pretty much anything we feel like yakking about and sharing it with you. And let us not forget our weekly Mr. Potter Award.
No, we're not professionals on anything we talk about, but we love to yak about stuff and give you our opinion on the matter.
So tune in at secularyakking.com or check out our feed on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and anywhere good podcasts can be heard.
And who knows what craziness will happen.
Yeah, just like this.
And we're back.
So like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about coming out in this episode. and kind of our experience with that is coming out atheist. I mean,
Right.
there are a few different ways you can come out.
I've had comments saying like, oh, I didn't realize, you had to come out with something like that. It seems more like sexual coming out kind of thing.
Yeah, like sexual orientation.
Right. Or also deconversion.
What that word?
Right. Someone said that it sounds more like something you do as you're coming out of a cult.
Oh, right. I think they're thinking of deprogramming, though, which is also something you kind of have to do when you're coming out of religion. It's not just a cult thing. You have to kind of deprogram your mind and reanalyze everything. But yeah, I never really thought of that aspect of it until I became an atheist. And then I was like, I got to tell people about this, Like, I didn't want to hide the way I really felt. Plus, like, I was involved in a couple Bible studies and going to church, and we were in a small group. Like, you have to tell people. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we're not. And plus, I live my life as an open book. I have for a while now, because there was a time in my life when I was very deceptive and I told lies like all the time. And that time of my life made me realize how much I hate lying. And I never want to go back to that. I never want to live a lie. And so since then, everything in my life has just been out on the table. Like, I don't hide anything. You can ask me anything about myself and it's never too personal. And I wanted it to be the same with this. I wanted to be able to just like talk openly about it.
Right.
So that meant coming out. And I was like, oh, like, it's not just for, gay people coming out of the closet. You also come out of the closet as an atheist. And holy crap, how's that going to affect me and my relationships and our life? Plus, at that time, we were moving away from everyone we knew. We were moving down to Cincinnati.
Yeah. Which, like we've mentioned, that both helped and hurt in ways.
Yeah.
I think mostly it helped.
Yeah. I mean, there was the aspect of feeling isolated, and then to know that I could end up coming out to all of my friends and family and feel even further isolated because there could be this wedge driven into our relationship after that.
Yeah. So not only are we locationally moving away from people, but potentially, as far as relationships go, moving away from people.
Yeah, it was kind of a scary concept to consider. So I know for me, when I was considering coming out, I wanted to write a Facebook post for everybody, but first write a letter to like my close family and friends. I mean, to the really close ones, like parents and, parent-in-laws and stuff, we just talked to them in person or over the phone. But then like close friends and brothers and sisters and stuff, we just wrote them a letter, or I wrote them a letter, because at that point it was just me.
Yeah.
When I came out, it was just me.
Yep.
And that was in April of 2015 that I did, I believe. I didn't really consider the possibility of just not telling anybody. Like, when I look back on it, I'm thinking about it, and it just never seemed like an option to me. What about for you? Like, I know you didn't really do it on Facebook.
Right. Yeah. I think it was a couple different reasons for me. One, I'm not quite as outspoken as you are about that kind of stuff, but also I was just thinking about it, and you mentioned a date, April 2015. I can't think of a date. Like, it felt like a longer process for me. So it wasn't.
And more gradual.
Yeah. So I can't think of like an actual date or a time that I was like, oh yeah, I no longer believe.
You mean
so
like
it didn't seem as monumental.
Do you mean like saying it to people?
Right.
Oh, okay.
and like labeling myself.
Right. Yeah, you just
So it didn't seem like an event that I had to announce. It was just more of like a gradual kind of growing, evolving.
Well, yeah, your deconversion was gradual and such. But then your coming out kind of was too, because you just like had conversations with people randomly and kind of mentioned it in passing.
Right.
And mine was very different from that.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about our experiences with that, like how they differed. Because I think it's kind of interesting. Like we're very, very different personality wise, and we approached this very differently as well.
Yeah.
For me, I wanted it to be an event. I wanted like everyone in my life to know so that I wouldn't have to hide. And also, I thought that it would be important as an atheist in a country and in a world that is very religious. I thought it was important that I speak up and say, hey, you can be an atheist and be a good person. As I was listening to podcasts, I was listening to like Seth Andrews on the Thinking Atheist. And I think I wasn't listening to Dogma Debate yet, but I was listening to a couple of things and realizing like how much stigma there was against atheists and thought that wasn't fair.
Especially in the South.
Yeah. And I wanted to be an example of a good atheist, like someone who didn't believe, but it didn't change my moral character.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt like it was my responsibility as someone who could come out without facing like, you know, losing my job or, you know, being disowned by family or kicked out of my home or anything like that. I had that opportunity to say something. Like the most that could happen is I could lose relationships or have uncomfortable conversations. And I thought, you know, it's worth it. Like I could handle that. And I was surprised when I did make that Facebook post, which I'll read it in a little bit. We'll bring it up because I actually wrote a blog post about my coming out experience. So I have what I wrote in that blog post. And if you want to read that, you can go to reallifebeyondfaith.com. And that's where my blog is located.
Yeah, we'll also put the link in.
Yeah. But I was interested, I was surprised by how much positive feedback I got when I posted that, because I expected a lot of blowback. I have a ton of Christian friends. And at that point, it was more Christian friends than atheist friends, like a lot more.
Yeah, because we didn't have any kind of community at that point.
Yeah, we were very new to all this. And I was just kind of, you know, dipping my toes in and figuring stuff out. So there were a lot of people telling me that I was really brave to do it and courageous to do it. And I wasn't expecting that, like, because I didn't feel like it was a courageous thing. I felt like it was a necessary thing. But I think a lot of people look at it differently than how I was looking at it.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah. Thought it was interesting. But I mean, it felt good to be encouraged so much. I'm just like, well, I don't think it's brave, but thanks. Like, just telling y'all what I think.
Do you feel like you lost many friendships or relationships after coming out? Or you said you were surprised by the positive feedback. Was it mostly positive?
It was mostly positive. Like some people said, you know, that they were sad for me, I guess. Like one person said, "Oh no, Jenica." But then they went on to yeah. But they were joking.
Yeah.
And they went on to, you know, tell me that they were proud of me for sharing that and for being brave. Like everyone kept saying. So At first, no, like I didn't lose any relationships over it. There were people who expressed concern, of course, and wanted to know like what happened and why this changed and stuff. And so we had some civil conversations. I did get into some like little debates here and there, especially with people who were trying to like challenge me on some things. But overall, like they were pretty civil little discussions and debates. Like I had a little bit of a debate with my brother, even one of my brothers, and it never got ugly. I got really, really lucky in that area with getting positive feedback, even from people who are upset about it, you know?
Yeah.
I just have good people in my life, I guess. Now there were a couple of people that the relationship kind of got severed by it. Just because, like, the main thing that we had in common was our faith.
Right.
And it's what brought us together to begin with. Like, even a few people who were bridesmaids of mine.
Right.
I just really don't talk to them much anymore because there's not much we have in common anymore. My passions are so different.
Yeah.
We're so far removed.
Yep.
That there's just really nothing there anymore. It's really sad,
Plus,
though, because I still love them. It's just different now.
Yeah. Plus, it's not like we live close to them anymore.
Right.
So we can't, visit.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there was one person who was one of my bridesmaids, and we actually have been unfriended from each other on Facebook. I can't remember if she unfriended me or if I unfriended her. I think she unfriended me because I usually don't do that unless it's like a super necessary thing. I don't know. But we were getting into arguments that were kind of like side issues. Like I think with this one was about abortion maybe. And she said some really hateful things to someone in a debate on one of my posts. And when she was called out on it, it kind of like blew up into a thing. And then my mom messaged her, and then she messaged my mom with some really, really nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the end of our relationship at that point. But it wasn't like she unfriended me or disowned me as her friend because I was an atheist. It was more like the way I was looking at the world and looking at some of these issues changed, and we clashed on those things.
Yeah. And those can be hot button issues.
Yeah.
That there's no compromise for.
But otherwise, I haven't really lost any friends. Oh, one thing that was really fascinating about it was getting messages from people who were like, hey, me too. I just haven't told anybody. Yeah. Like people that I went to church with even, they would message me and say, hey, I've had these same questions and I don't think I believe any of this either anymore. I just haven't really said anything about it. And they would like ask me questions and ask me like what made me decide to speak up about it and stuff.
Yeah. I've been curious about that myself because I grew up in a different state. And I don't see those people much anymore. So I wonder if all the people that I went to youth group with are still in the same spot or if they have turned the page.
Moved on, yeah. Right. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I wonder how many of those people in my life haven't reached out to me, Like those are just the ones who actually messaged me. Like who knows like how many people I grew up with and stuff who were very religious.
Yeah.
Like maybe aren't now. Like I was one of the most religious people in my high school.
Yeah.
Like I wore Christian t-shirts almost every day and I was a leader in Youth for Christ. Like people from my high school would be shocked to see who I am now.
Right. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe we'll get some messages after this one.
Yeah, maybe. So for you and I, it's been kind of easy-ish to come out. I mean, it's uncomfortable and we have to answer a lot of questions and stuff like that. But as far as like the cost of coming out, we haven't lost much except for a few relationships here and there, just because, you know, now they know that we're different.
Right. And that's inevitable.
Right. But I know that there are a lot of people out there who don't believe, who absolutely can't say anything.
Yeah.
Because it would have dramatic effects on their life. And I would never want them to listen to an episode like this and think that we would judge them in any way for making the choice to not say anything.
Yeah, you got to do what you got to do to stay safe and protected.
Right. And
I mean,
financially supported.
Right.
Like
there's parents that disown their children and kick them out of the house.
Literally out on the
streets.
street. Yeah. For not believing anymore.
Which just seems
so
crazy.
They threaten to take away their college tuition. People lose marriages over this. They lose relationships with in-laws, with children. Their own children will turn their backs on them. It's amazing. Like, the stories that I've heard are just heartbreaking.
People
don't
even
understand.
Lose their jobs.
Yeah. Especially like clergy members. That's a really big thing for them, because you come to this realization as someone in the church, like in leadership in the church. And what are you supposed to do? Just like quit and sacrifice your livelihood right there on the spot? Like some of these.
Yeah, that's your whole life.
Yeah, some of these guys, like all they've gone to college for was seminary, you know, like for being a pastor.
Right.
If they don't have that anymore, they don't really have like a skill set to fall back on. Speaking of, if you are in that position, there is the Clergy Project that you can get involved with. Patrick, do you want to look up the website for that? We'll give it. Okay, so it's clergyproject.org. So if you're in that position where you're in clergy, you're a pastor, you're a deacon, you're whatever.
Someone who can't come out. Yeah,
worship leader, you depend on that position for your livelihood or whatever. You can join the Clergy Project. It's anonymous. So, and it's very private. No one has to know that you're a part of it. And they help you kind of transition out of it, or at least just give you support as you are trying to pastor and to be an atheist at the same time. Like, I can't even fathom that. Like, that must be so hard. Like, I can't hardly stand I couldn't stand people not knowing.
Yeah.
I can't imagine like standing up and giving a sermon, knowing in the back of
opposite of what you believe.
Yeah. Knowing in the back of my mind that I don't believe any of it. Mm-hmm. Or like trying to come up with sermons that dance around like what I believe. But anyway, so yeah, we recognize like some people just simply can't come out at this point for certain reasons, and we respect that. However, if you are in a position where you can come out and you can tell people that you're an atheist, but you're still a good person, it makes a big impact. Because for me, the big moments in my life that I started questioning what I believed and started really giving some thought to my faith and why I believed was when my brother told us he was an atheist. Mm-hmm. And I had to grapple with that. And when my dad did. So coming out was those were the sparks that led me down this path.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I've said it in a previous episode, but people don't realize, what it's about until they know somebody in that position. It hits close to home if you know somebody. Yeah. And then you have to, like you said, grapple with it and deal with it. Even
in other communities, like the LGBTQ community, like sometimes people can't really wrap their mind around LGBTQ until they know somebody personally who is gay or lesbian. Right. And it kind of opens up their heart to the concept, and then they start having like a heart for these people. Like, I know a lot of parents of gay people will get involved and like open up their mind and start talking to their friends about it and stuff. And it can change a whole community just by having this one person who is out and open about their sexual orientation. It's so impactful once you just know somebody in your own life who is that way, know that they're a good person.
Yeah.
And it's the same with knowing someone who's atheist. Knowing them and knowing that they're a good person has the same kind of impact.
Yeah, for sure. So did you want to talk a little bit about your Facebook post and read what you wrote
Oh, yeah,
to the
sure.
Facebook world?
Yeah, let's do that. All right. So the post that I wrote, I spent, I think, a couple of days like kind of thinking about like how I wanted to say it and what I wanted to say, because I knew that like the wording would be important. I didn't want to come across like too bitter and angry because I didn't want people to think that that's why I, had made the decision that I had made. It was a very intense process of research and looking into what I believed, and I didn't want anyone to think that it was just a flippant decision,
Which it's not.
Right. So this is what I wrote. For the past several years, I have had some doubts and hard questions about my Christian beliefs and have sought out answers without much success. I've held on to my beliefs just assuming the answers must be out there and I would hopefully find them, or maybe God would reveal them to me. Recently, I realized that I needed to actively dig into research about Christianity and figure out why exactly it is that I believe and what evidence there is for those beliefs. I studied the arguments on both the apologetic side and the atheist side with as objective an approach as I could. I truly wanted to find sufficient evidence to continue in my lifelong beliefs. However, what I found was quite the opposite. I no longer trust the Bible as the inerrant word of God, and therefore cannot use it to base my entire life on. Not only that, but there are a lot of very disturbing stories, laws, and commands directly from God in the Bible that indicate to me that the God, in quotes, I've been worshiping all these years is not the God of the Bible. I have no desire to worship that God. If you don't know what I'm talking about, refer to Psalm 137:9, 1 Timothy 2:12, Jeremiah 19:9, 1 Peter 2:18, 2 Kings 2:23 through 24, Deuteronomy 22:25 through 29, just to name a few. Because of the things I have learned in my very extensive research, I can no longer call myself a Christian. This is not the outcome that I wanted when I went into this. I was hoping to strengthen my faith. I realize that this is probably pretty hard for some of you to read, but I want to be honest about where I stand on things. I'm open to talk with anyone who has questions for me. Just know that I did not come to this decision without much turmoil, but I now accept that I don't have all the answers, and that is okay. Everything actually makes a heck of a lot more sense now, though, surprisingly. I'm not going to go into all the details of why I don't believe in this post, so if you want to know more, private message me. Even now, looking at that 2.5 years later, I still am pretty happy with what I said and how I said it.
Still rings true.
Yeah.
To how you feel.
Yeah.
What you believe.
I was actually wondering tonight if I was going to read what I wrote and think, oh, I could have said that better.
Right.
But actually, that was pretty decent.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't too abrasive, but I also didn't sugarcoat it. The reason that I don't believe is because the Bible is immoral. The God that I've been worshiping is one that I made up, a God that agreed with me pretty much.
Right.
I based it pretty much on the Bible, like my God, but I cut out the things that I thought were abhorrent. And then when I actually stepped back and took an objective look at it, I realized, no, the Bible just describes an abhorrent God, and I just cut out those parts that I didn't like.
Well, that's why there's so many different denominations and religions. Like, you take the parts that you like and throw out the parts that you don't, and then you create a different denomination for it.
Or a different God. You know? Seems like every person that I talk to has a different idea of what God is. I actually, I haven't gotten into very many religious debates in a while because I got kind of burnt out with it. But recently I was using kind of the Socratic method with a few people on Facebook, just like asking questions about their beliefs, like kind of like probing them. You're like trying to make them like think a little bit deeper about why they believe. And, you know, if this is true about God, then isn't this also true about God? Like that kind of questioning. And at one point I said to one of the people, I'm like, it seems like every new person I talk to has a new idea. Version. You know, like there are as many versions of God as there are people who believe in him. And
how did they respond?
I think they kind of just blew it off. I don't think they really responded to that.
At least on Facebook.
Yeah.
You never know what they're actually thinking.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in their comment, they kind of blew it off. But it's true. Like, it seems like the more compassionate of a person you are, the more open-minded you are, then the more compassionate and open-minded your God is.
Right.
Sometimes a compassionate person can be hindered by their religion or by their idea of God. Like, they want to be compassionate. I think that was kind of me. Like, I wanted to just pour out love for people, but I was kind of held back by the fact that I had to believe that gay people were wrong, and I had to believe that people who didn't believe in God were going to go to hell for eternity.
It brought up the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, it like suppressed my compassion in that way.
Yeah.
So I think that happens too. But for some people, they just start making justifications and just change their concept or their idea of who God is and what he stands for. And really it's just like what they do.
And it's all based on the Bible. But, you know, like you said, the smaller issues are more aligned with how people feel about you know, certain things.
Like, oh, well, my God is a God of mercy. So I believe that no matter what you believe, as long as you live a good moral life, then God will understand and you'll be let into heaven anyway. Like I had people saying that in the conversation. It's like, well, how do I argue with you? Because you're not basing any of that on fact. You're just kind of making up your own thing as you go.
And the thing is, those people can probably find Bible verses to back their position up. But at the same time, there's people on the other end of the spectrum who also have Bible verses to back their side up. Like Jesus said he's going to make you hate your family.
Yeah, like the fire
and cause division.
Yeah. Yeah, like there are a lot of verses where Jesus isn't the hippie that people make him out to be. What was that verse? I bring a
came not to bring peace,
but
to
bring a sword.
Yeah.
He wasn't necessarily all about peace and happiness and bringing little children to him. He, according to what the Bible says about him, was there to fight, you know? So it's not all like hippie Jesus.
Peace and mercy.
Yeah. But I mean, there are so many different interpretations of Jesus, even within the Bible.
Right.
And then you go individual to individual, and it's just like, yeah, there's just never ending versions of who God is. How did we get on this tangent? I don't even know how we got here.
I was just thinking, I was like, how do we get here? I don't know where to go from here.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, coming out. Yeah. So,
It's a funny thing.
So we were going to talk about what it was like coming out to our parents
Oh, yeah.
and maybe give some advice to those who are considering coming out.
Yeah.
So with my parents, it was pretty easy because, like, with my dad, I was talking to him every day anyway because he had just come out as an atheist. And
To the whole family.
yeah. And so I was like bouncing stuff off of him whenever I would learn something new and I needed someone to talk to. He was the perfect person to talk to because he had just gone through that research and he knew exactly what I was talking about. So with him, it wasn't as much like a big coming out. It was more like, okay, you're right about this. Yep, that doesn't make sense. Oh my gosh, can you believe?
And he was already on your side.
Yeah. And then, like, I told my brother, who was also an atheist, and I was just like, yeah, so I am there with you. He's like, well, welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Then with my mom, it was kind of a gradual thing, too, because I was also talking to her a bit. And I think one day I just told her, you know, that my research wasn't turning out how I had planned.
Yeah.
That
But she probably took it the hardest.
Of my family. Yeah. Yeah, it was hard for her, especially since I was her support person after Dad became an atheist.
Yeah.
Because she, you know, she would talk to me and cry and, you know, express her feelings about that whole situation with me. And now here I was ending up on the same end with Dad. And so it was harder for me to empathize or, you know, to be that support person for her. And I feel really bad about that. But, you know, there was nothing really I could do with like where my research was leading me, you know. I thought it was going to strengthen my faith and it totally didn't. Like it backfired big time.
Yeah, we both went into it trying to strengthen our faith and here we are.
Right, yeah. So with her, it was kind of more of a gradual, like, yeah, this isn't turning out right. And then I sent letters to my brothers and sisters-in-law. And I think the trickiest part was coming out to your family because at that point you were still a Christian and I was an atheist, but I wanted them to know where we were on things. And I wanted them to know that you were on a journey too. Because I didn't want it to be out of the blue if and when you finally, you know, reached your conclusion. Because if you became an atheist, I wouldn't want that to be out of the blue for them.
Yeah. Plus the whole situation with where we were, you know, moving to a new city, they were starting to wonder, you know, if we're going to find a church. And that was right around the time that we, you know, started coming out of it. So we weren't searching for a church. So they were down visiting us at our new apartment. And, you know, that topic, well, we kind of forced it. It didn't just naturally come up.
We planned on talking to them about it that night.
Yeah.
And I kept giving you looks like, are you going to bring it up? Are you going to bring it up? Because I didn't want to be the one.
Yeah. And we were waiting to get our boys to bed till things calmed down. Not trying to like talk over them. So we got the boys to bed. And then, you know, I brought up that we weren't actively looking for a new church. And this is why. And you kind of took over from there not because I didn't want to talk about it, but because I didn't have the right words.
Yeah, I've always been the talker in our relationship. In case you haven't noticed. but oh,
jinx.
We always do that.
Yep. But yeah, we actually had a really good discussion that night, and like just talking about where our questions were coming from and like our journey so far in our research, and that, you know, we're not taking it lightly. It was a big step for both of us to even, you know, start down that path and find out the things that we did.
Yeah, and your parents were very receptive to what we were saying. As far as not like blowing up on us or getting upset. or defensive or anything.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the most powerful things that your mom said was that it doesn't change their love for me as their daughter. And that like really, really stuck with me. And I'll never forget that because it meant so much. Like that really, really touched me.
Yeah, same.
You know, what you were saying about like not searching for a church and stuff. I'm remembering now that was one of the main reasons that we needed to tell them.
Right.
Like even aside from me just wanting people to know so that I could be out and open with it. But it was getting to a point where they were like asking us like, hey, have you found a church? Have you found a church? Have you been looking? And we're like, no, we've been busy. We've been unpacking. We're trying to settle in. And it's like, we can only do that for so long. Like we have to tell them at some point.
Yeah. And part of that was because, I mean, before we moved down here, we were still living an hour and a half away from them. So whenever they would come visit, they would visit our church with us. Mm-hmm. So when they came down here, they would, want to visit church with us in the new city.
Yeah.
But at that point, we weren't looking for a church. So that was going to be something that was going to come up eventually.
Yeah. And at that point, I was very like anti.
Yeah.
So that didn't help either because I was in my kind of angry phase. Yeah. I hid that phase that night when we talked to them. Like I didn't get too much into that stuff.
Yeah.
I did talk about some of the stuff in the Bible, like the immoral stuff, because your mom was asking a lot of really good questions. Mm-hmm. And so it gave me an opportunity to kind of share some of my research. But I refrained from being offensive,
Yeah, I think that helped. It ended up being a very constructive conversation.
Yeah. And one of the things that I said to your mom that night that I now encourage other people to say to people, like to their family members or friends who believe in like God's sovereignty and that he reveals to people himself. I told her that if she trusts God and believes he's a good God and believes that I am seeking him on this journey, that he will reveal himself to me, Like, so it's out of her hands then. And she doesn't have to feel the responsibility and the weight of bringing us back to God, that if she believes he's a good God and that he's sovereign and that he would reveal himself to me, then he'll do that with or without her.
Right.
I think that's, because that's what I used to believe. And it takes the burden off of that person's shoulders.
And it's not manipulative.
No, because it's just what they believe.
Yeah.
And so it's reminding them, like, if this is what you really believe about God, then keep this in mind when you feel like preaching at me or something. Like, you don't have to. And we know the gospel. Mm-hmm. So it's there. If God wants to reveal to us that it's true, that's on him. Mm-hmm. If he exists. Yeah, exactly. So then, plus that can be like a little something to stir doubt with them, because then when we continue to become more and more active in the atheist community, they have to realize God's not revealing himself to my loved ones.
We are the family members in that situation that forces them to try to grapple with it.
Right, like Nate was to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nate being my brother. So overall, it was a really good conversation with them. I think it went really well. They were obviously very disappointed, and they expressed that they, very much disagreed, even after I shared like what I had learned and stuff. Your mom kind of like gave me some of the apologetics arguments and stuff like that. And I did my best to refute them without like going too much into depth with it, because I didn't want to do that night, like I didn't want it to be a debate. I wanted it to be like, this is where we are. Yeah. This is where I am especially, and Patrick is kind of on his journey and not sure where he's going to end up on things.
Yeah, that can be a lot for somebody all at once.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this is what I believe now, and this is why you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So probably don't
And
do
let's
that.
have an argument about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like as far as advice goes, I would recommend that you talk to the person in a way that's not going to put them automatically on the defensive. Like, don't talk down to them. Don't be condescending, and explain it as being your experience and your research and what you have come to the conclusion on, rather than, describing it as being like, well, I discovered that religion is bullshit and anyone who believes that is an idiot.
Yeah. So that can be tough because you might be in your angry phase.
Yeah.
But for the sake of, keeping relationships, if that's something you want to preserve, then it's best to dial that back at least for that first night.
Yeah.
Or, whatever time of day it is.
Right.
For you.
That first conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to approach it with caution, and you have to base your approach on the person, because everyone's different and everyone's going to respond differently. Your parents, I mean, I knew that it wasn't going to be horrible, as in I knew they wouldn't disown me, but I expected it to be like maybe a little uglier than it was. So I was impressed and happy about that.
Yeah, it turned out really well.
Yeah. But if I would have approached it in a different way, I think it could have been much worse. Or if we hadn't actually planned on talking to them about that, and then in the midst of a conversation or in the midst of like a heated debate or argument or something, if I would have just been like, I don't even believe in God anyway. Like, not that we would have been arguing with them, but, sometimes that's how people out themselves on accident, is like, I don't even believe this shit anyway.
Yeah,
and
probably
then,
not the best way.
Yeah. And then your loved one is just like dumped upon with this.
That's when it gets confrontational.
Yeah.
And people get defensive.
And that's part of the problem of bottling it up and not telling people right away, is it puts you at greater risk of accidentally outing yourself or someone else accidentally outing you. And then you have to deal with it in a much more confrontational, difficult way, instead of being able to plan it, think it through, figure out how you want to explain it, and in, what time frame, stuff like that. Like, it's good to be able to plan it out and do it in such a way that you're not going to ruin that relationship for good.
Yeah.
Plus, it helps to have awesome in-laws.
Yeah, that usually helps.
That's a big one too.
Yeah, for both of us, actually.
Yeah, yeah. So, Patrick, you didn't really have like a big coming out. You didn't like do it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of a gradual thing. So, do you consider yourself to be out at this point, like for real, even though you haven't?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I mean,
now with this
we've been
podcast,
to-
especially.
Yeah, right. And we've been to events, and at the events, there's always sensitivity to people who aren't out, as far as like being in photographs, right?
Yeah.
And I just haven't really minded or cared.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because we always post pictures of us at conferences and stuff like that, and free thought is sometimes in the name. And we went to Reason Rally, and then we went to Reason Con. There have been a few of them where it's like all people would have to do is just look up the conference, and it's right there, like in your face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you prefer that way of being out? Like not making a big splash and making a big long post, but rather just kind of like little bits at a time, making people aware, like, yeah, this is where I stand on things.
For me, yeah, that's where I feel more comfortable because
It was kind of your personality.
yeah, like it's not my
MO.
yeah, to have that kind of attention for, that.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind, being who I am and being true to it. I just didn't feel the need to make a big announcement.
Right. Yeah. Plus, it's been a while at this point that you've been at that conclusion. So it'd be kind of odd to just like randomly make a post like, oh, hey, by the way.
And everyone's like, yeah, we know.
Like, duh. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Plus, like, people already knew where I stood on things, and then they could easily just see that you like my posts. And
Right. The tricky part was people thinking or possibly thinking that, you were the one forcing me into it, which wasn't true. Like, yeah, we went on the journey at the same time and you actually did first, but that doesn't mean that your journey was my journey and your decisions and conclusions were mine. Like, I had my own journey and conclusions that I came to, and I was pretty adamant about the conclusion being my own. Like, I didn't want my decision to be because just of what you were doing.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make sure that people knew that too, because I didn't want to be, the corrupting force in your life or something. Like, I wanted people to know that this is something that you were on your journey researching on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, of course we were talking about it. And of course I was sharing with you things I was learning. But ultimately it was going to be your conclusion that mattered. And
that's why it took me longer.
Yeah. And you made sure that it was absolutely your conclusion. And that might actually be the main reason it took you as long as it did, because you didn't want to just follow me into atheism. You wanted to make sure that this is actually what you believed. And I admired that very much. It was frustrating for me because, here I was trying to be an activist and trying to, talk to you about my frustrations and stuff. And you were like semi a Christian, so I had to hold back in some ways, I guess, or like I felt like I had to. But I did very much admire that you made a point of saying, no, I can't just follow you into this. This needs to be mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a couple of different ways that you can come out. You can do it more subtly, more gradually, like Patrick did, or you can make a big splash with it like I did. It all just depends on like your situation and
who
your
you
personality.
are as a person.
Yeah. But
the biggest thing is the situation that you're in. Like, if you feel safe doing it.
Definitely. So hopefully this was helpful in some way, or at least entertaining to hear about our stories.
Yeah. And if anyone's listening and we didn't answer any questions that you might have, feel free to get a hold of us.
Yeah, there are a few places you can get a hold of us and private message us. You can email us at reallifebeyondfaith@gmail.com, or you can go to our Facebook page and message us. It's facebook.com/reallifebeyondfaith. And then we're also on Twitter at RLBF pod. So we would love to hear from you guys, and we appreciate you listening again this week. We're going to go ahead and thank our patrons. You guys are awesome and you make this happen. We have a new patron this week, Joe. I'm not going to share his whole name because he's actually a closeted atheist himself, and for good reason. He's an awesome guy. He has supported us it's been probably a couple of years at this point that he's wanted us to be more vocal and like talk about our experiences and stuff. So he became one of our highest level patrons, and we really appreciate that. Thank you. Then we would like to thank our patrons who are at the level of support that we plug something for them at the end of each episode. We've got Thomas Smith of Serious Inquiries Only.
It's a podcast. You should go check it out.
Yeah, it's awesome. He talks about science, politics, philosophy, religion, and he takes a skeptical perspective on it. And
funny.
Yeah, he's pretty funny at times and other times very serious and takes a critical look at things. So check him out.
And we also have Justin Krebs.
And Justin is promoting Atheists Fight Hunger.
They're trying to raise some money to, obviously feed people who need it. They have a $10,000 goal, and they're currently up to just a little bit over 5,000. So just a little bit over half. They're going to be working with a nonprofit program called Outreach to organize food packaging event. It's going to be held at PastaCon in Philly, and that is on the weekend of October 13th through 15th of this year. So if you want to help feed some hungry people, consider donating to Atheists Fight Hunger.
The link will be in the show notes.
Do it.
Do it. Do it now.
We also have Rich.
Yeah, Rich wants to plug Recovering from Religion, which we've talked about in, I think, every episode so far, because they're an amazing organization right along the same lines of what we're trying to do with this podcast, helping people who may be leaving religion or have left religion and need some kind of support.
And most people may not realize it, like why you would need recovery from religion, but there can be a lot of baggage that goes along with it, coming out of it and realizing, things that you don't believe anymore and what goes along with it. So it's a good organization to help with, coping with losing religion.
Yeah, and they have support groups kind of spread
lines
out over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually lead one of those support groups in the Cincinnati area. So check it out and see if maybe there's a support group near you. You could get plugged in with that. You can go to their Facebook page. It's Recovering from Religion. You can just look it up. So we're getting tired and loopy at this point.
At this point, it's almost 1 a.m. So.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and bring this episode to a close. And we want to thank you guys for listening again. And for those of you who are supporting us, we love you and appreciate you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk to you guys next time. But in the meantime,
keep it real.